If this stuff is a bit confusing, and I know that it is, we're about to make it very simple with Steve Forbes here in just a few seconds. But first, economists also keeping an eye on the Consumer Price Index, which is an indicator of inflation as well. The red bar is where we are. You can see it's almost double where we were last March. The White House, though, claiming it's not worried about any of this.
Obviously, our analysis is going to be done by our economic experts. They continue to convey that they believe the impact will be temporary, transitory, however you want to refer to it.
There you go. So let's dive into all of this with an expert who's great at making economics easy to understand. Steve Forbes, chairman and editor-in-chief of Forbes Media. Sir, thank you so much for taking the time.
Good to be with you. Thank you, Rob.
Of course. So I want to put back up the Consumer Price Index over the last year, just so people can see it. A lot of numbers on the screen. All this basically says we're heading towards inflation, it would seem. That red bar at the end there doesn't look too good. Break down exactly what's happening here.
What's happening here is that the Federal Reserve is printing too much money. That is devaluing the dollar. You're starting to see the gold price starting to move up. That's an indication. Commodity prices are soaring, as you referenced to. That's another indication. The frothiness in some of the markets, you see it in terms of the cryptocurrencies. So there's a lot of cash out there, and there's not much confidence at the end of the day that the Federal Reserve is going to be able to handle it. The Fed actually believes this crazy thing called the Phillips curve. That is, they believe that if you want low unemployment, you have to have higher inflation. If you want low inflation, you have to have higher unemployment. That is a preposterous theory, but it's one that the Federal Reserve worships these days, has for years. And so they didn't mind having 2 or 3% inflation. And now as inflation starts to rise up, and as you know, Rob, it's bigger than that 2.6%. You ask anyone who goes to a gas pump, anyone who goes to a supermarket, anyone who buys lumber, as you've indicated, anyone who buys copper, can see that in the real world, the prices are going up at a much faster pace. So the government is mucking it up. They should have a stable dollar, but they think a cheap dollar is the way to prosperity. We should have learned from the 70s that that leads to big trouble.
What exactly, if you had complete control of this situation, you answer to nobody, what would you do?
Well, first, take off all those crazy tax increases, stop all of this crazy spending, take away the bonus for not working, and put the government, send it on vacation for 6 months, tell them you can get your paychecks, just do nothing for 6 months, and watch this economy come roaring back. I'd tell the Federal Reserve, look at the price of gold, stop printing all that money, you take a vacation too, and let the markets, i.e. free people, work. And by golly, we would do well.
Amen.
We don't need these politicians right now. Less is more.
Do we ever need them is my question. Let's talk about this this money supply issue here for a second. You had $4 trillion, and again, this is all kind of new to me talking about this. $4 trillion was the money supply number March 2020, so right when the pandemic started. 18.6 trillion today. Make this easy to understand for people at home, what that means, because it's obviously an explosion.
Well, what it means is with all the government spending, with that pumps money into the banking system. That's why bank deposits are soaring. But also the Federal Reserve is buying about $120 billion of bonds each month. What that means, Rob, is this. The Federal Reserve will call up a bond dealer like Goldman Sachs and say, I want to buy $1 billion of bonds. Goldman Sachs says, fine, here's the $1 billion of bonds. Give me a check for $1 billion. Where does the Federal Reserve get that $1 billion to buy the bonds? They create it out of thin air. They just say, it's in your bank account. Poof, it's there. Wow. The ultimate ATM. So they create money out of thin air. And that's how you get these increase in the money supply.
Sure.
People have also been banking their savings, not knowing what the future is. So there's a lot of cash out there. People have a lot of wherewithal to spend. Businesses do too. So it's all waiting out there, and so far the government doesn't know what to do to stop the bad troubles coming.
And real quick, wouldn't cash be, if we are going to see a lot of inflation, wouldn't cash be the worst place? You know, you wouldn't want to have a lot of cash if we're going to see inflation, right? You want to put that into something, wouldn't you?
Well, the normal thing is to buy hard assets, whether it's a gold, silver, or something like that, or a group of commodities, or real estate or land. But you do want cash. It sounds counterintuitive, but you do want some liquidity because you don't know what these clowns are doing.
Understood.
And if they do start to do things right, you want to be ready to take advantage of it. You always want that nest egg. keep
Gotcha.
it.
Yeah, absolutely. What about this article in The Hill regarding the Fed's handling of inflation? I thought this was an interesting read. It appears the new thinking is going against about 50 years of knowledge, if you read this article, talking about how they want to handle this, how they're not raising interest rates now the way you would have expected them to when they saw all these signs of inflation.
Well, there's a new crazy theory out there called modern monetary theory.
Right.
And it's one that Biden administration is clutching to. And that's the idea money does not matter anymore. If you want something, the government, you just say, bring it to me, I'll print the money, and there'll be no consequences. It ignores 4,000 years of history when you do that kind of nonsense, whether it's with coins, paper money, digital money, whatever. So they think because after 2008, 2009, the Fed did print a lot of money, but that money, in effect, Rob, was put in a deep freeze. The Fed just held the money. They paid interest to the banks, so it never entered the economy. That's not the situation we're going into now. This money is going into the economy. That's one reason why prices are rising. That's one reason why interest rates are going to be going up. And that's a big reason why we're going to have trouble down the road. And this crowd is absolutely oblivious to it. They'll blame it on Donald Trump when the trouble hits.
Like everything else. It is amazing that they don't seem to learn. Some of these things seem so fundamental. You know, it just seems so basic. It's an economy. We learn. We've seen it happen so many times, and yet they continue to push back. The president tried to put a confident spin on things today. Let's go ahead and take a listen.
Because of the American Rescue Plan, forecasters are projecting we'll see the fastest economic growth in nearly 40 years in the months to come. We're moving in the right direction.
So, you know, the president thinks massive tax increases, big government spending will keep the economy going in a great direction. What do you say?
Just the opposite. And the economy was doing well going into this new administration took office. The vaccination program, a miracle, was in force. States, even some blue ones, are starting to back down from their lockdowns. And that's why the economy is roaring. The big potential headwinds to the economy are the big tax increases, the big spending, which means inflation and higher interest rates, wrecking our energy independence by going after oil and gas and things like that, putting on massive regulations. All of these things are going to harm the economy. So the rescue plan was put in by Trump, and the de-rescue plan is what Joe Biden is proposing: big taxes, big spending, big regulation. Never worked before, ain't going to work now.
Well said. Steve Forbes, chairman and editor-in-chief of Forbes Media. Sir, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you.
All right.
Hi, Emma Reckenberg here. If you like this video, there's a whole lot more to see on Newsmax TV. You can watch for free right here on our YouTube live stream and be the first one here each time our experts break down real news. Just hit that subscribe button, ring the bell icon, and stay with us on America's fastest growing cable news channel, Newsmax TV.